Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me in the Bettor's Box. It's BangTheBook.com's MLB betting podcast for Thursday, April 16th. I am your host, Adam Burke. This and every edition of the Bettor's Box presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB and the number 200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook. 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. My 2020 MLB betting guide still available in PDF form over at BangTheBook.com. Look, obviously we don't know how long the season is going to be here, but a lot of good information in that. You know what? Quite frankly, it may help you out for 2021 as well. So you check that out over at BangTheBook.com. Also doing a lot of NFL draft coverage over at the website right now. I think I wrote one of my better pieces in the last several months talking about how you should let the betting markets be your guide for the NFL draft. You know, these mock drafts are, based on what some people hear from their sources, based on some of their own evaluations, some of their own biases. But if you watch the betting markets, you can really see what's going on out there. You can see what's real, what isn't, what should be viewed as legit, and what probably isn't very legit. And I talked about some of the examples that we saw going into yesterday, and we've seen a few more examples here today. Things like CeeDee Lamb now favored to be the first wide receiver taken. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about Tua and Justin Herbert and all that kind of thing. C.J. Henderson was a big talking point over the last few days in betting circles. So please check that piece out over at BangTheBook.com. Again, the betting markets will be a tremendous guide for you when it comes to making bets here on the NFL draft, when it comes to seeing who may go where, seeing which player your favorite team may be taking there with their first-round selection or selections. Use the betting markets as your guide. They've been very, very good on the politics front. I know they'll be very, very good here on the NFL draft front as well. At the website, we'll be doing some more college football stuff as we get some more clarity on the season. But I will be recording this afternoon for a Friday show with Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. We're going to talk some college football. We're going to talk about his season preparations. He's been releasing team previews on Twitter and for his clients over at BradPowersSports.com. So we'll definitely be talking about that stuff on that Friday edition of the show. And finally, over at BangTheBook.com, we've got sportsbook reviews for a lot of the different offshore markets. And look, you're going to have a lot of different lines, a lot of disparity, a lot of discrepancies out there for the NFL draft, for season win totals, all that type of thing. Head on over to BangTheBook.com. Check out those sportsbook reviews. You're going to get some nice bonus offers if you sign up through us. But, again, you want to be able to shop around for the best prices in every single betting market, and you can do that by having multiple outs at your disposal. So check out those sportsbook reviews over at BangTheBook.com. All right, so look, I've been talking a lot of stats. I've been talking a lot of different starting pitchers. I've been talking about a lot of stuff in hopes that the season actually gets underway here. Throughout March, I was doing the 5 and Fly segments, breaking down each specific division. We still don't have baseball, and I don't know when we'll have baseball. Some people kind of pointing towards July 4th as that F yeah, America kind of moment. Maybe we get it, maybe we don't. I'm certainly hoping we get sports sooner rather than later for a lot of different reasons. But with the quarantine, with everyone burning up the streaming services here, I wanted to give you some of my thoughts on some of the more popular baseball movies that are out there. Some that have been out there for a long time, some that were released this past decade. I'm try to hit as many of them as I can here in no particular order, just sort of running through. Maybe some of these will be hot takes. Maybe some of these won't be. Maybe you've got movies that you like. Maybe you don't care for my opinions on these baseball movies. But we'll be doing another Monday mailbag after the weekend here. Adam at BangTheBook.com, skatingtripods@gmail.com, at skatingtripods on Twitter. If you've got dissenting opinions on these movies or want me to check out any sort of baseball documentary or anything like that, shoot me a message. Let me know. We can talk about it on Monday's show. Maybe I can even get a chance to get some eyes on that. I'll give you some of my thoughts here coming up after the weekend. But in any event, look, it's pretty obvious for me to start with Major League, right? As a Clevelander, I should love this movie. And for a long time, I really did. Major League, my wife and I, in the lead up to the season, we would do kind of a baseball movie marathon. We'd watch one movie a day. Usually it took us about a week or so to get through the movies that we, both liked, that we both wanted to watch. And there are a lot of great moments and great quotes and quips and one-liners from Major League. And obviously, there's some romanticism about that movie for me because, there are some scenes, even though the movie wasn't shot, even though the baseball scenes weren't shot in Cleveland, it's still, there's still a lot of homage paid to my hometown here. I gotta say, though, man, one of the things that's the worst for me about going to baseball games is hearing the inane conversations around me or hearing just the outright wrong conversations. And it pisses me off to no end when people misquote this movie or overuse the quotes. And it always happens here, in particular because it's Cleveland. I don't know how many times I've heard, too high on a ball that's hit 460 feet or, just all the other quotes that come out of that movie. And it's good. It's a good movie. I think I just got burned out on it a little bit because it's referenced all the time and maybe just because it's such a Cleveland thing. Look, the spring training scenes are great. They're hilarious. The love story with Jake Taylor and Lynn, I mean, it takes away from the movie for me. I understand you need some of those cinematic elements and stuff like that, but it really takes away from the movie for me. But one of the things that's really cool about that movie is Bob Uecker. And Ueck did a lot of ad-libbed lines in that movie. If you watch some of the things that have come out about, the filming of Major League or stuff like that, Jonathan Knight actually wrote a very good book about it. But a lot of those lines from Ueck were ad-libbed. And something I really love about that movie was that it had some edge. It had a little bit of raunchiness to it. And that was something that was lost in Major League 2, which I'll talk about here in a second. But, again, there are just so many endearing things about Major League for me, obviously, as a Clevelander. And I know a lot of people do love that movie. Love Lou Brown, snarky, supportive, but still a realist and a real straight shooter. All the different characters that were on that team. It's kind of funny, too, because I personally could almost draw sort of a parallel to the 90s Indians. You had a lot of very colorful personalities with that 90s team. Omar Vizquel kind of had a reputation around here, but then was also an artist and, a drummer and all that kind of thing. Kenny Lofton obviously was a swaggy kind of guy. Same thing with Manny Ramirez. Albert Bell, just that feared power hitter. There were a lot of personalities on that team that Mike Hargrove had to deal with. And I think that's something that maybe kind of aged that movie really well, especially for people, around Cleveland. When you get to Major League 2, though, I had a lot of issues with this movie. First and foremost, they wanted to make it more family friendly. They wanted to, strip down that R rating from the first one. This one's more of the PG variety, and it hurt the movie, in my opinion. I think that the authenticity of the first movie with some of the swear words and some of the things that were said, stuff like that, I think that really helped the first one. That got lost in the second one. There's a lot of things that you could have done with Jack Parkman. There's a lot of things that you could have done, with Jake Taylor kind of being a little bit more crotchety, with Rick Vaughn after he kind of makes the transformation back into the Wild thing. And another thing that's really hard for me to get over, and this is something that almost to a degree ruins the movie for me, keeping Willie Mays Hayes in the movie without Wesley Snipes. Now, Omar Epps did a fine job, and, he did okay for what, his role was in that movie, but just rewrite the character. Just go with, his brother, Billy Mays Hayes or something like that. Just go with something different because there's nothing worse. It's such a hard mental hurdle to get over in any kind of movie where it's the same character played by somebody else. It just doesn't work, and it didn't work in Major League 2. Now, again, there are some things that I do like about the movie. I think the Wild Thing story is fine. The fact that fame kind of went to his head, he gets this attractive agent and, all that kind of thing. That's fine. I think Rube Baker is hilarious. I think Tanaka is hilarious. Parkman was a great addition. Of course, Bob Uecker is very good once again. But there are two main issues I have with the movie. And the primary one is Omar Epps as Willie Mays Hayes. And again, it's not Omar Epps' fault, but it's just, you got to write the character out at that point in time. It just wasn't the same. It wasn't as edgy. It's fine. Don't get me wrong. It's fine, but it doesn't really hold a candle to the original Major League. And Major League 3 back to the minors just shouldn't exist at all. Now, this is maybe the hot takier part of the podcast here today. Movies like The Sandlot, like Little Big League, like Rookie of the Year, like Angels in the Outfield. Now, I understand that movies like this have a special place in a lot of people's hearts because they grew up with these movies. To me, I have a really hard time feeling a connection to those types of movies as I've gotten older. There aren't many movies that I watched as a kid that I watch these days. Maybe some of the movies I watched as a teenager, some of the coming of age types of things, like the American Pie movies, stuff like that. I'm a little bit more nostalgic about those. Sort of this concept of growing up versus, kind of being a kid. It's the same thing with like the Mighty Ducks movies or Little Giants, something like that. I don't have that same romanticism. I don't have those same kinds of feelings about those movies that a lot of people do. I know a lot of people, still love The Sandlot, still quote The Sandlot, Little Big League and Rookie of the Year and Angels in the Outfield. Those are kind of secondary, if not tertiary, to a movie like The Sandlot. Yeah, as you get older, you get maybe a better understanding of the themes, of the overarching tones in the movie. And look, if you've got kids, and you watch these movies with your children, they're going to take on a different meaning for you. I don't have kids, not particularly interested in having kids, really at any stage of my adulthood, but certainly not at this point in time. So I don't really have that same love for them. That being said, The Sandlot is the best in the bunch, to say the least. Little Big or Rookie of the Year, it's fine. You get Gary Busey as Chet Steadman, director Daniel Stern as Brickma, the pitching coach. That's very funny. A lot of comedic relief with that. Angels in the Outfield, great cast. Maybe people don't talk about that movie enough. Maybe it's just sort of that, the religious undertone to it or whatever. But you got Danny Glover, you got Tony Danza, Christopher Lloyd, a young Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Matthew McConaughey, Adrian Brody, Dermot Mulroney. That's a really strong cast for that movie. Maybe people don't speak of that movie in the same way that they do the other ones. I think maybe it gets possibly a little bit disrespected. But again, it's very tough for me to just have any kind of connection to these movies now as an adult. And again, I understand everybody's got this soft spot for Sandlot. And like I said, if you've got kids, then these movies sort of speak for themselves a little bit in that regard. But I haven't watched any of them, in a very long time. I haven't had any desire to watch any of those in a very long time. So maybe it's just me. Maybe I don't like to have fun. Maybe I don't like to feel like being a kid again or whatever else. But, again, obviously the Sandlot first in the pecking order there with that. But had some very, very good casts to these movies. And maybe it's an anti-Disney thing. Maybe it's kind of that, that Disney approach to a lot of different things. And I like some of the Pixar movies and stuff like that. Up always gets me. Absolute tearjerker. We watched Onward last week, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. I don't know. What is this, day 970 of quarantine? We watched Onward. That was pretty good. So there are some things with Disney that kind of get me, but the sports movies, kind of tough. Outside of Miracle, and maybe I just have more of a connection to Miracle because, I played hockey growing up, was a USA Hockey member as a player and as a referee. So maybe there's kind of that. Maybe there's just a little bit more of an element to it to me. But also, I think the historical context of Miracle is also something that fascinates me. So that one's kind of in a category unto itself. But again, I don't have the same nostalgia about those, kid-friendly baseball movies for the most part. How about Moneyball? This will not surprise anybody. Moneyball is among my favorite baseball movies here. I think it was extremely well done. That's not a surprise. You've got, the big backing of Columbia Pictures, Brad Pitt, a co-producer. Very heavy cast. Aaron Sorkin was a co-writer. He's done Social Network, West Wing, Sports Night. A big Aaron Sorkin guy. I actually like The Newsroom. Not a whole lot of people like The Newsroom, but I did like it. And then Peter Zalian, another guy who does that. Schindler's List, Gangs of New York, Clear and Present Danger. Great writers. Big studio backing, strong cast. Very, very well done movie. For those that haven't seen it, Brad Pitt, of course, plays Oakland A's GM Billy Beane. You've got Jonah Hill in sort of this hybrid role as Peter Brand, who by and large is supposed to be after Paul DePodesta, who was, a longtime baseball executive, and then an executive for the Cleveland Browns as well. Philip Seymour Hoffman plays manager Art Howe. And, maybe the movie didn't portray Art Howe the way that he should have been. Art Howe was very upset about that after the movie came out. But I thought Philip Seymour Hoffman, for the character that he was supposed to play, absolutely nailed it. Interestingly enough, an interesting tidbit I saw, I was kind of putting together some notes about these movies, just some interesting things to pass along alongside my opinion. Former Major Leaguer Royce Clayton actually played Miguel Tejada in the movie, which was kind of interesting. And I also saw that originally David Justice and Scott Hatteberg were supposed to play themselves. Of course, obviously, as we know, they wind up with Chris Pratt as Scott Hatteberg. I'm not sure who it was that wound up playing David Justice, but they had some ex-base or some ex-minor league players who actually playing some of these roles too, which was kind of nice. But I love the dialogue, and that's a big Sorkin thing. Sorkin is so dialogue heavy. The dialogue was great in this movie. The way that Brad Pitt just sort of authoritatively said everything, just kind of, well, adapt or die, you're with me or you're not. And obviously, too, I mean, as somebody who's big into sabermetrics, it is a movie and a plot that would resonate with me, but I like it a lot. A lot of baseball movies are kind of more whimsical. They don't pay as much attention to the baseball stuff. This movie was certainly more on the executive and the front office sides, but I thought everything was done really, really well for this movie. I like it a lot. It's definitely one of my favorite baseball movies, and one that if I stumble upon it, I will watch it. There are a lot of baseball movies I have to, actively want to watch them in order to see them. Moneyball is not one of them. I'll pick that movie up in the middle and watch it. If I catch it, it's on cable or something, I'll watch it from the jump. Definitely one of my favorite baseball movies, to say the least. And if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't read the book by Michael Lewis, which is very, very good, I would highly recommend you do that here, especially with this quarantine going on. Another movie I really, really liked is 42. And yesterday, Jackie Robinson Day around Major League Baseball, would have been great if we had games with everyone wearing 42. But this was extremely well done. Chadwick Boseman is awesome as Jackie Robinson. Harrison Ford is exceptional as Branch Rickey. Terrific. It's an authentic feeling movie. And again, maybe this is just the way that I kind of watch things, or the way that, even if I look at my music tastes, for example, I like a lot of authenticity in my music. I like a lot of people that write their own songs. That's kind of why I've gone the direction that I have in country music, with a lot of, Southern rock influence, Texas country kind of thing, outlaw country kind of thing. People that write their own songs, or that do an awesome job covering songs from artists that wrote their own music. I'm really, really big on authenticity. And I thought 42 was very authentic. Now, there are some little things here and there, some little detail-oriented things that I saw, because I was kind of looking for some interesting notes about these movies. Just like pitchers that were right-handed that were supposed to be left-handed, things of that sort. But this movie doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles, and it doesn't need them. It's not super flashy. It wants to stay true to not only the story of Jackie Robinson, but the story of America at that time period, and the story of baseball at that time period. And that's what I like about it. It could have been a biopic. It could have been, a Ken Burns-esque documentary about Jackie Robinson. And it's not. It's about Jackie Robinson, but it's also about, his teammates and the way that they embraced Jackie, and about society and how it kind of started to turn a little bit at times, at least in certain areas across the country, with regards to Jackie Robinson and appreciating his talent and appreciating the hardships he was going through to play Major League Baseball. This movie was excellent, and I enjoyed it. I saw it in the theaters. I enjoyed it then. I've enjoyed it every time after. It's a great, authentic movie, and I think it really does justice to the story of Jackie Robinson and to the story of that period in particular that they were really looking at there. Extremely well done. Like Moneyball, obviously it's based in something that actually happened. And maybe that makes it easier for me as a viewer to appreciate and to get that deeper level of understanding for something. Whereas, again, things like those childhood movies, the Disney movies, I don't have as much of a connection to those. But Moneyball and 42, really, really like those two movies a lot. Both highly recommended for me here during this quarantine period. How about Bull Durham? Where I don't like the love story in Major League, between Jake Taylor and Lynn, it works in Bull Durham. And maybe it's just because, I guess I romanticize minor league baseball a little bit. Having gone to Akron for college and going to a lot of games there, go to a few games at Lake County, it's one of these things, especially if you've got a real small town feel to it, the entire community just kind of embraces that. And that small town feel of Major League Baseball is just, there's something special about it. And I'm going to hate to see, what happens here after this whole quarantine thing. Major League Baseball was already going to cut a lot of these minor league teams out of the equation. And those are really sad things for a lot of these towns. These are points of pride and the host families and all that kind of thing. This community feel to minor league baseball is just, it's something different. It's very hard, I think, to put into words. And, with Bull Durham, and I'm sure baseball and minor league talents, I'm sure it was so much different, back in the 70s and the 80s than it is today, than the frame of reference that I have today. But it's so interesting that you've got almost this coming-of-age story with these young minor leaguers and Annie Savoy, of course, played by Susan Sarandon. She's kind of the teacher on how to be a man, and what she gets out of it, we all know what she gets out of it in a physical sense. Sometimes it's over the top, but I think by and large it works. And I think that, you kind of reach this crescendo with her, this point where she kind of gets tired of trying to bring these young men along. And then you get this opening with Crash Davis there. And the fact that now she can kind of, settle down for herself. She's kind of past that point in her life too. Almost like as Crash Davis is retiring, she's retiring too from her job as this, quote unquote, very loosely using the term here, teacher. And like I said, sometimes it can be over the top. And the opening monologue for Annie Savoy too. She's almost kind of proselytizing a little bit, but it works. That's kind of who she is. And in this movie, so much comedic touch. You've got the subtle humor, the dry humor. Robert Wool is phenomenal as the pitching coach, Larry. He's just an outright comedic foil. You got a lot of quotable lines in this movie. You've got kind of that, I don't want to say hero story about Crash Davis, but, setting the minor league record and, all that kind of thing, that the perseverance type side to that story. It's not an Oscar win. And you can maybe even argue that with the themes of the movie, baseball is almost kind of secondary. But I still really like this movie. I do really like Bull Durham. There's a lot to like about this movie. It's actually a baseball movie that I kind of saw after I had seen, a lot of the other baseball movies. I was very late to seeing Bull Durham. But so much about this movie works. It's just good. And it's definitely Kevin Costner's best baseball role. There's really no denying that, in my opinion. I really like Bull Durham, man. There's something about it. And again, it is maybe whimsical-ish. But again, it has a historical frame of reference about minor league baseball and the life of minor league baseball. That's why I can kind of connect with it. Again, there is just enough authenticity to Bull Durham that I wind up really, really liking that movie. So Field of Dreams. And I just let the cat out of the bag, and I think Kevin Costner's best baseball role is Crash Davis in Bull Durham. Field of Dreams is a very polarizing movie in the baseball community. A lot of people like this movie, and a lot of people really, really don't. The more I've watched it, and I did really like it at the outset, the more I've watched it, I've kind of become indifferent to it. I think the concept is great. I think the story idea is fantastic. And, of course, as we know, it comes from the W.P. Kinsella book, Shoeless Joe. There are a lot of things to like about this movie. There are a lot of things not to like about this movie, and I'll start with that. My God, Ray's wife and daughter are annoying as hell. And maybe that's what kind of ruins the movie for me. They are brutal. They are very, very hard to take. I like the historical baseball element to this movie. I like the story of Archie Graham, which is actually true. And one of the things I found out about this movie is that the people that Terrence Mann, of course played by James Earl Jones, is talking to in the bar about Archie Graham were actually friends of Archie Graham that found out about the movie, drove down from Minnesota to Iowa to sort of be seen in that movie. So something about a little nugget like that, almost an Easter egg, I guess you could call it, about that movie, I do really like that. And of course, the having a catch with his dad part. I mean, look, for anybody who played baseball with their dad growing up, for anybody who's lost their father, fortunately, I have not. But for anybody who's lost their father, a very emotional moment, to say the least. There are a lot of flaws, and there are a lot of unlikable characters in the movie, too. And, you know, there's some tough things to wrap your head around. You know, Kevin Costner kind of just kidnapping Terrence Mann, you know, some of the things like that. It's not at the top of my list. It's a fine movie. I won't go out of my way to watch it like I maybe would have a decade or so ago. It's good. It's not great. Like, there are some flaws. Like, there are some things that if you're willing to overlook those flaws, you can very much enjoy that movie. It's not at the top of my baseball list. I guess it's kind of hard to describe why it's not. I think it's good. If you haven't seen it, obviously I encourage you to check it out. But there's some things where it's not as polished of a product as I think it could have been. For the Love of the Game could have been so much more. Not a great look for Costner as an actor. Probably his worst acting role of the baseball movies that he did. This movie lost money relative to its budget. Vin Scully is the best part of the movie. Just not one that I'm super invested in. Your view may vary on that movie. How about The Natural? Of course, with Robert Redford. And this is another one where it's not necessarily based on, you know, baseball in a historical sense, but it's kind of almost the baseball story of King Arthur. It's a very heavy movie. It can be very slow at times. It can be very long at times, but a great cast. It's just, you know, it's all about the kind of baseball movie that you want to watch. If you want to watch something whimsical and fun, something that's not heavy, something that's just kind of easygoing, sort of an escape, a distraction, The Natural is not that movie. A lot of symbolism, a lot of parallels to historical figures. It's kind of a thinking man's movie in a lot of ways. It's not an escape at all. It's a pretty heavy movie. That's why it got Oscar nominations. You don't see a lot of sports movies getting respect from the Academy. This one did. And I do like Robert Redford a lot as an actor. As far as a non-baseball movie goes, if you've never seen The Last Castle with Robert Redford, James Gandolfini, Mark Ruffalo's in that movie as well. Very, very good movie, The Last Castle. I like The Natural, though. And again, it's heavier. It's slower at times. But it's really, really good. It's very heavy, but I think it's extremely well done. And it hits all the points that it wants to hit on. And I respect that about that movie. And similarly with a movie like 8 Men Out. It's the same thing. It's slower. It's heavier. It's got that historical focal point, which I do like. Strong cast, and obviously a very compelling story to the 1919 Black Sox scandal. Justice was done to that story. That story is compelling. It is fascinating, and you sort of feel that through this movie and through what was a really, really good cast. Director John Sayles did a great job with this movie. maybe it wasn't a big screen type of movie. Maybe it's almost more of a 30 for 30 or a documentary or something like that. But I think in its state for what it was, it's a really well done piece of history, quite frankly. And obviously, with anything that's based on history, they do take some liberties here and there. But I think if you're looking for a historically based baseball movie, this is kind of the one. So if you've never seen Eight Men Out, I definitely think that that's one that is definitely worth taking a look at. And again, I'm saying baseball specifically because as far as historical ball playing movies go, A League of Their Own is tough to top. Now, this movie, for those that don't know, pays homage to a real life league that ran from 1943 to 1954 called the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. And again, this is an iconic movie, a great cast. Tom Hanks as Jimmy Dugan, of course, fantastic. I haven't seen it in a long time, and it is a movie that I need to rewatch that I could probably appreciate it more now that I'm older and maybe potentially a little bit wiser. But, so many lines from this movie that have been used in other things, all of the accolades from the film industry and all of that. I can't speak a ton about this movie because it has been a while, at least 10 to 15 years since I've seen this movie. And I probably would have a much different view of it now than I did back then. But again, it is kind of a movie that stands on its own in a lot of people's minds and one that I need to pick up and watch again here in the not too distant future. The Rookie with Dennis Quaid. Again, a Disney-fied story. Okay, fine. But it's pretty good. It's heartwarming. It's got, that great, underdog type of story with Jim Morris. And I think what really works for this movie is that Dennis Quaid can do this type of thing justice. This idea of perseverance, this idea of maybe not being the most skilled guy, but being able to get by and being able to sort of get to a seminal moment, in your career. And for Dennis Quaid, I mean, look, couple of divorces, the coke addiction, he played kind of that troubled athlete role in Any Given Sunday. This was an easy movie for him to channel, and that kind of comes through. And like I talked about earlier with, why I appreciate the authenticity of the artists that I do from a musical standpoint, it's because a lot of those songs are coming from personal experiences, and they're able to connect with them differently. And it comes across in the music. Unless you've got an absurd amount of vocal talent, you're doing somebody else's song, unless you can really get into it, your vocal talent carries you. But you can hear the different layers in music with somebody who writes their own songs, then performs their own song. And I think what made this movie work is I think Dennis Quaid was able to get into the character of Jim Morris. Now, Jim Morris didn't have the coke addiction or anything like that, but just kind of the never giving up and the overcoming a lot of different things. And for Dennis Quaid, keep overcoming the stuff in his personal life to keep getting work. I think he was kind of able to channel that into this movie, and it works. And again, I think this movie is more about perseverance than it is about baseball, and obviously kind of the Disney factor in it too. I think they did the baseball well enough for the Rookie to be, one of the not the upper tier, but the upper half of baseball movies. Trouble with the Curve. Clint Eastwood, Amy Adams, Justin Timberlake, John Goodman. Quality framing or quality framework for the cast. Just not a good movie. And obviously for me, it's not up my alley. The premise of, analytics are bad, numbers are bad, we need scouts. Scouts are still very prevalent in baseball. So I think in general, the plot of the movie was pretty misleading, pretty disingenuous in and of itself. The screenplay was not very good at all. Again, you've got a great cast here, and the movie just fell totally flat. And I wish they could have did more with it, but they didn't. So, Trouble with the Curve is definitely a very forgettable baseball movie for me. Same thing as a movie like Summer Catch, stuff like that. Very, very forgettable. Admittedly, there are some I haven't seen. And I was hoping to maybe watch these before I got doing the show, but just didn't really find the ability to do that. The original Bad News Bears, not one I've seen. Bang the Drum Slowly, not one I've seen. I don't remember movies like Million Dollar Arm, Mr. Baseball, Hardball, The Babe, Mr. 3000, I think. I don't really remember any of those, but, hey, we got a lot of time here on our hands with this quarantine to watch some different stuff, maybe try some of these baseball movies if you haven't seen them. If you haven't seen Moneyball, 42, Bull Durham, The Natural, and 8 Men Out, those are the ones that would be at the top of my list as far as baseball movies go. If you haven't seen Major League, again, you don't have to rush to it, but as a Clevelander, certainly I've got kind of some nostalgia for that movie, and it is very good. Major League 2 is fine. And obviously, if you've got kids, go ahead and watch those cartoony type movies like The Sandlot, Little Big League, Rookie of the Year, Angels in the Outfield, stuff like that. But for me, it's Moneyball, it's 42, it's Bull Durham. Those are my top three, not in any particular order. Natural, 8 Men Out, kind of in that next tier. Like I said, I need to watch A League of Their Own again, just to get some more thoughts and some more preference on that. Like I said, I'm recording Thursday afternoon a college football show with Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com, so we'll do that on Friday. Monday, another edition of the Bettor's Box. Tuesday, we'll chat again with Brian Blessing. Wednesday, we'll talk with Thor Nystrom of Roto World about the NFL Draft. Thursday, Bettor's Box, and we'll see what happens after that point in time. So I'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.